Welcome to another episode of the Journeymen Co. I'm Michael Van Vuren, and joining us as always is our very own Jeffrey Williams. Hello, Boyki.
Hey,
Good
buddy.
to see.
Good to see you.
So tonight, Marcus Watson,
Big one.
England Sevens, Olympic silver medalist, dominated the Premiership with that dangerous sidestep for many years. So really looking forward to chatting to Marcus.
Marcus, my dearest friend, and really a really pure human being, one of the best I've come across. Lived with him for 2 years, roommates for 2 years. So this is going to be a good one. He's transitioned from sevens to 15s, unbelievable. Playing in Italy now, got a little family over there. Was at his wedding in the summer, unbelievable. Let's talk about that left foot step and let's get into it. Let's go.
So Marcus Watson, our dear friend, thanks so much for being on tonight. You one of the ultimate professionals we've ever played with, just like your brother, both cut from very similar cloth. Thank you so much for spending time with us tonight. England Sevens, an Olympic silver medalist. As I was saying to Jeff just before you came on, devastated the Premiership with that sidestep for many years. So thanks again, Boyki, and we look forward to chatting to you.
No, I'm really looking forward to it, boys. Two good mates of mine, so looking forward to it.
Yeah, Marquis, listen, this is a special one. Obviously, my best mate coming on the Journeyman. And talking about that left foot step, got us out the hole a lot with England and the Sevens. So really awesome to have you on here. We're going to chat, keep it organic, talk about the Sevens, talk about Rio, talk about Italy now, talk about the young family. It's going to be so fun. Share a little bit of our journey together, some of the characters we met along the way. So just kicking off, I think it's important for us to start. Where did it start for you? Like the building blocks of why did you start playing rugby? What was that all like? Let's talk about that. Let's go into that.
Yeah. Okay. So I started playing rugby probably, I wouldn't say late, but you obviously hear of boys in England playing rugby when they're like 5 or 6 years old. That wasn't me. I was still in Nigeria at that point, and rugby is not a thing over there. So moved over to England, 6 or 7. And my dad's always been a big rugby fan and player. He'll always tell he was a 7 for Saracens. He'll always tell
A
you.
ripper.
Yeah. But one thing I appreciated a lot about my dad, one thing in a very big list, is that rugby was his favorite sport, but he never like really pushed us to just play like one sport. So when I think the first sport I enjoyed was football, and I used to play football on foot. I used to, played football first, and then I moved schools to a school called St George's that played rugby, and so I played rugby Saturdays and football Sundays. And to be honest, I preferred football for so long. And then one year, I don't really know what changed. I wouldn't say I particularly was any better at rugby than I was at football or anything like that, but I think I definitely remember my dad enjoyed watching me play football. There's no doubt about it. But there was just some sort of, you could see like a little twinkle in his eye or something like that when he'd watch me play rugby, and I reckon that had a little part to play with it. And one thing I like about rugby, and I still do, is just there was like there's nothing quite like running with the ball in your hand sort of thing. Pick that up, and then it was rugby from there.
Perfect. Because the reason why I went there is because, when you got two brothers and even your third brother, Callum, all professional rugby players, all play Premiership, there must be a secret ingredient. And knowing you, I know it's your family and the strong family bond that you guys have and the support you guys have, and how important that is to have parents that sort of understand and push in the right places. And I know Duncan very well, great man, great human, great father. And it's so good to hear how you pay homage to him like that. But I suppose getting into rugby, getting into the 15s and playing it, and then eventually finding yourself playing professional, how did that look for you? Because again, playing in London, playing at St George's, what was the professional route for you? How did that look? What did you?
I'd say very different. One thing that I guess I can't remember the documentary Benno made. What's it called now?
Something in the game, or
it's something the game. Oh.
It's on Amazon.
Yeah, it is. That's really just I've forgotten it, but the name of it, but it's really good, and it kind of just highlighted the fact of like
Everybody's game.
that's the
Everybody's
one,
game.
everybody's
Yeah,
game.
yeah.
That's it. And it kind of highlights how sort of the English system works when it comes to rugby and professionalism. It's kind of like a very private school kind of vibe. And to be fair, us three boys did go to private school, but our school was a hockey school actually, which I don't know why feels really embarrassing to say.
You can see it. You
But
hey, okay.
It's
yeah,
a great sport, hockey.
tell you what, I don't think I didn't enjoy it as much, but it was like that was the main sport at our school. Rugby wasn't really a thing. I don't think there was. I don't think before sort of me and Anthony and Callum. I don't know if there was any had been any professional rugby players, or that certainly wasn't something that was a thing. Whereas the school system is pretty big in England. So I guess I got quite lucky that I was at London Irish Amateurs, which is just the Sunday club. And through that, we had a really good team. So some of the county, we were undefeated for a long time. Some of the county scouts or whatever would come watch us play. And I'd always wanted to play rugby, but I never really thought, I don't know, you both know me, especially obviously you, Jeff, having known you for so long, being my best man and all that. And I'm pretty go with the flow with a lot of things. I was even not maybe so much now, but when I was younger, I was just kind of like, I think I always kind of thought or wanted to be a professional sportsman, but I never really like, I had no plan of how to get there. I just kind of ended up being one, if that made sense, by just enjoying playing on the weekend. So I was playing, enjoying it. And then I think when I started realizing that it could be a thing was got into London Irish Academy, and I remember it really well because I was so nervous about getting the letter saying if I was in or not. It was me and Jonathan Joseph's first time we'd met, and obviously been friends since then. And got the letter and was buzzing about it, and then kind of like still even at that point, I wasn't like, oh, I'm definitely going to be a pro rugby player. I just kind of, for some reason, I thought it would just happen. But then, and then it kind of the England. I think the first time I thought it was possible was when I got picked for England under 16s, and you put on like an England shirt and you're like, wow, this is serious. Or you think it is back then, and then you look back and you realize some of the training you were doing probably wasn't the one, because backs were doing mauling sessions all the way up to the halfway line. I don't understand that, but yeah, I just kind of and then got picked up through that. And to be honest, I had a pretty smooth road through from under 16s. I didn't really have too many bumps in the road, so it kind of all went pretty good up to then.
When you got a side step like that, though, brother, you don't need much. I mean, you if you got a step like that, you can you fly through the system under 16s and 18s and 20s, sevens, and that's where we met actually. And it was one hell of a period we had together, seven. So from the academy, you worked with Neil Hatley there. He pulled you in, eh? He pulled you in, yes.
Yeah.
You worked with him. What was your class like? Who was in your class again? Max Laheath?
We had an unbelievable academy, I won't lie. So in the year I kind of put almost the 3 years, year above me and year below together. In the year above, John Fisher, he might have been.
Oh yes,
yeah.
He's coaching the Reds.
Who's now, coach the Reds, and he's a great bloke as well. He was one of the just to talk about people. He's one of the first people when I got into a professional environment where he was this big time guy in your eyes when you're younger. Played for Wellington. I think he played England Saxons really young, and you just kind of have this impression that someone's going to be like quite arrogant or something like that, just because of who they have a reason to be. You think at that age, he was not like that at all. He was a really friendly bloke, and I just remember him kind of taking me under his wing at one point and just telling me how good he thought I was. And it's just funny the little things that you just kind of remember when you're that age, how much that kind of thing sort of means to you. And it's nice to see that he's coaching now, and I'm sure he's going to have a huge influence on some of those young boys. But yeah, John Fisher, Tom Homer, obviously you boys know him pretty well. Yeah. JJ,
Class.
Jamie Gibson,
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah, Matt Garvey, Marlon Yard, Sam Edgley, Guy Armitage,
Ham Edgley, boy. Shout out.
Sam Edgley, a guy called, did I say Kieran Lowe?
Yes. No, you didn't.
Oh,
You
didn't
Your
Kieran
brother.
Lowe?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. Kieran Lowe, Laheath, and I feel like I'm missing somebody as well. Actually, I don't want to miss anyone here, but no, I think that could be it. Oh, Rob Herring,
Oh,
Ireland international.
yeah.
Yeah,
Ulsterman.
no, we had some academy.
Yeah, no, it was. And because I was doing a bit of reading, because obviously, like I started playing against you when you had already finished with the sevens and
Mm,
moved on to Newcastle.
mm,
But what I found interesting was you moved to Sarries after Irish,
that's right.
and you won the JP Morgan Premiership Sevens competition with them. Is that correct?
Uh, you know what? I actually think did we win or did we lose? I think we lost in the final against Newcastle. I'm not sure. We might have.
Well, blame Wikipedia.
Yeah.
That's the info I got. But anyway,
Yeah. No, I think we
my
might have.
question was, regardless of if you
Yeah.
won or lost, was that kind of like the catalyst for you changing into sevens?
There was a few things I would say that was a catalyst. The first one I'd actually say was I'd always loved watching sevens when I was younger. Before it was even like a big thing. I remember watching Richard Horton, Matt Tate, and Tom Vondell, and being like, and a guy called James Bailey, actually, sorry, who coached England women's sevens. I watched all these guys and thought I had sort of similar-ish attributes at that age, and was like, that looks like a fun game to play, without knowing how much it was going to kill all of us when we actually played it. But I'd say that was the first thing. The second was Middlesex Sevens. Do you remember Middlesex Sevens when so that was basically like JP Morgan, but it was a 2-day tournament, like the actual sevens circuit is at Twickenham with all the Premiership teams. And it was awesome. It was like some teams took it pretty seriously and some teams maybe not so much. And we, as the London Irish team, took it real seriously. We had like all three Armitage brothers. Sam Edgley went on to play England Sevens. Myself, JJ, Paul Hodgson, Solossi Tajitakembao, who was the best winger in the Premiership for like 2-3 years. Topsy Ojo. We had a freakish team. So we won that. And I think that kind of gave me a bit of a taste of like, this is pretty fun. Um, and then yeah, Ben Ryan kind of bringing me in and speaking to me a little bit before. Yeah, I'd say that was probably more of a catalyst, because the only reason I say that about the JP Morgan situation was I'd gone to some training camps I think before that, so I kind of was already involved, if that makes sense.
Nice.
Very nice.
Jeff?
Staying with
You,
I wanted to say something about the sevens, because coming into that sevens program, I mean, getting to meet Ben, what did that look like? How did it work with you, 15s player, contracted with 15s, and then getting into sevens? Talk us through that, because I think for young players, sevens isn't currently in the UK that big. I mean, if you look at South Africa, New Zealand, Australia to a degree, Argentina, they use sevens as a huge tool. I mean, you look at the final, there were like 7 or 8 sevens players in that final, from Quagga Smith, Artie Surveyor, Ricky Ione, Desmond Colby. There's tons, right? But talk me through that process in the UK. How was it back then?
Yeah, it was a strange kind of transition. So maybe 2-3 years before, no, in fact, maybe just a year before I'd joined, boys kind of like would dot in and out of the sevens from 15. So you'd see like Ollie Phillips, Christian Wade did so well when he came for a season. Who else was there? Matt Tate, Tom Vondell, like those boys, and then even before that, James Haskell, Danny Kerr had all kind of come in and then gone on to get like England caps. So I was kind of at the end of that period, and myself and Ollie Lindsay Haig were sort of in our respective academies, and us and remember Damu Damu, the best sevens player ever. Us three had like there was like they tried a hybrid contract where I was with Saracens and Sevens combined after obviously I had my 2 years London Irish, and sorry, we're just going off on a tangent here, but we spoke about hats and just made me think recently that actually Toby Booth didn't want to re-sign me actually at the academy, and Hats was obviously our academy manager and was like basically almost saying to me like, no, you've got to stay, like we've got to keep him. So Hats was like really pulling to keep me there, and from what I heard, because Toby Booth had never actually said this to me that he didn't want to sort of keep me on. I actually ended up speaking to Saris anyway because I was an immature little kid who just had no patience, wanted to play straight away without earning anything. Long story short, but yeah, it just made me think about Hats and how sort of important he was in trying to. He kind of saw something in me, but obviously I ended up going elsewhere. But sorry, going back
Oh,
to
I love that
going
because
on one.
we spoke the same thing about Neil Hatley with your brother, and we just spoke
Yeah,
about how incredible he is at seeing talent. He really is
yeah,
great. He's one of the best in the business. I mean, look at his classes that he put together when he was in charge
yeah,
of academies for like, how long was he in charge of the academy for? Like maybe 5, 6 years or something before
yeah.
he,
It must have been 5 or 6
yeah,
years, and like he'd always kind of told like him and John Fletcher from a young age, basically. And actually, you know, someone else that did a little bit was Mike Catt, as
yeah,
well. Always just made me think that they were like, you're. There's no doubt. Like, basically, just gave me this confidence that you're good enough. There's no question about that. Uh, and then, but yeah, I, I I was I I would do a lot differently if I was had my time again as a youngster. But obviously, it's got me to the point that I am today.
yeah.
You know, just to cut you off, uh, talking about Mark Catt, he actually tried because he's an old grey boy from Port Elizabeth,
Right.
school I was at,
Lucky school.
and he tried to get myself and Sia Kulisi to the London Irish Academy
Oh,
in
really?
what would have been 2000 and going into the 2010 season.
That's when I was there, I think.
Yeah, you would have been there.
Yeah.
This is my
Jeez,
my cousin Chris Clutie.
Yeah,
He knew Neil Hatley, and
yeah.
obviously from the Eastern Cape too, and he was family friends with Chris at Bath, and he was trying to get him over to the London Irish Academy. I remember it when I was in university, to all the young guys were coming out of high school. Anyway, it's a funny
Mm.
story. Everyone's
So,
connected.
on the Mike Cat thing, I've got one story to tell as well. Since, as you know, we said we talk about some stories. This one was a funny one. So Mike Cat had like I don't want to sound like an idiot here, but in the academy, Mike Cat had always given me the impression that like that he really rated me, and I was like the one that was going to step up, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And me and JJ were like like joined at the hip at that age, like always together. And like we had our first team game together. Jeff, you know the story, against Cardiff away, and it was kind of like Jay had really like impressed in training, and I think I'd had a little bit of a reputation or whatever as being someone who'd gone through sort of some age group stuff and was hopefully going to step up through sort of the academy where Dylan Armitage and Topsy Ojo had like breeded some wingers. It was almost as if I felt like as if they were trying to push me through as the next guy. Had our first team game against Cardiff, and they had the big dogs playing. Uh, who's the winger? Gareth Thomas, the winger, and he was my opposite man that day. And mate, I had a stinker. Like I was just trying, like you said, in this left foot step, just getting battered, and like he ripped the ball off me twice. I got ripped the ball off by someone else as well. Like just didn't have a very good game. JJ on the other hand had a good game, like a real good game. Mike Cat's like always kind of picked me up, and he's going around shaking everyone's hand like after the game as like coaches do. JJ's to my left, and Mike Cat's come around that way, so he's kind of speaks to JJ first, and he's like, "Hey, Jay, well played. First of many. Like, real good. Looks at me and just goes, we've got some work to do.
Hey,
I was like, oh no.
at least he's honest, boy.
Yeah, exactly. It's just one of those things that I was like,
Escapes.
yeah, heart just sank as a young kid. You know you played bad too, but then you're like, oh, jeez, that weren't good.
And obviously you boys both really accomplished sevens players. I don't know much about the game. Before I get into my question, you said Dammy Dam is the best sevens player ever.
He
Is it not? Is it not Serevi? I thought Vasali Serevi was.
Okay, so maybe a bit tongue in cheek, but in terms of England players that I've played with, if I was picking like a
Complete,
all-time
Mikey.
sevens,
Complete.
he might be the first person I'd pick.
Size, strength. He could pass. He could step. He could do it all. Do you understand?
Mm.
You know what I mean? He
Yeah.
was just, a sweeper. You know, Serevi's amazing, of course. Don't get me wrong, but he was just everything. A leader, a great human. I took his number, actually. He gave me his number when I came into the
He's
set.
such a nice dude, man.
And I was just like, I can't believe it. I'm
Yeah.
wearing dummy. Sacred, bro. It was sacred. But that culture,
boys.
we'll get into it. But I mean,
Yeah. So what I wanted to ask was, because you've both done it, how did you find that adaptation going from 15s into sevens?
So going from 15 to 7, sorry, when I was younger, like first
Yes. Yes.
how did I find it? So I remember the first training session I went to, and I was kind of like, I'd watched Dan Norton, James Rodwell, those guys, Ben Gollings or whatever, and I was this young. How old was I at that point? 18, I think. 17, yeah, 18. And I had a real good sort of A-League game that weekend. So the boys would come in and I'd scored a couple tries and like boys were giving me like a little bit of stick. Dan Norton is like no one I'd ever met before at that age, especially. I was like, I don't even know what the crack is with this guy. I was like, does he hate me already? Like he like goes in hard with with banter. He's like he's a legend, but he's like no one else you'll ever meet. But first training session, I was pretty nervous. And I got the ball on the wing. First thing I managed to do was I got the ball, and to be fair to Norts, he's an unbelievable player, one of the worst trainers ever. And I got the ball, and I kind of I goosed around him. And I just remember Ben turning to Norts and being like, "This guy's the real deal, mate. You need to step up." But that was probably short-lived because it was tough. It was really tough. Like the fitness was insane, mate. Like it prepares you. It turns you into, from me, a naive 18-year-old boy thinking that things were just going to happen for me, to me being like Ben Ryan sort of turning around to me being like, we need you to get the ball. You need to get the ball. So make sure that you're just not waiting for the ball to come to you. Go get it. And I was kind of like, that was just one of those things that kind of ever since then, I kind of changed a bit of my mindset into being like, things just aren't going to happen for you. You need to make stuff happen. Sevens definitely turned me into a man, I'd say.
I love that. I love that because I can just hear Ben's voice. I can hear how I knew what it looked like, and I knew how. Well, I came in a little bit later, so you were in the program for a couple of years before we met up. But those first couple of tournaments, how did that feel? I mean, running out, playing in front of 45,000 in Dubai, winning Dubai, playing in Hong Kong. Tell me about it, bro. A young Marcus Watson on the scene. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You were the boy. I mean, you still are the boy, but back then, talk me through that feeling, what was going through your head.
So my first tournament that I went to Hong Kong, and to be fair to Ben, I think he handled me really well because I was the youngest in the team, and I'd gone as 13th man, so I was just for the Hong Kong tournament. And Hong Kong at that stage probably still is the biggest sort of sevens tournament there is. It's a huge stadium, huge crowd. And I'm this 18-year-old boy turning up, and I'm like, this is insane. Like I wasn't playing, obviously, I was just watching. If there was an injury, I would have gone in. But we got to the either semi-final or final, and I remember thinking, this is amazing. Like all I want to do is this. And then so I was itching to play, which was I think like was a really good way in. And then the next week we went to Adelaide, Australia, and I I can't remember if someone got injured or I was supposed to play. I know someone had to. I think maybe Damu or Greg Barden had to go back to Army or Navy or something. So I knew I was going to be playing that next week. And Adelaide's a little bit of a smaller tournament for sure, but I was itching to play and turn up for the first day, and I've left my boots in the hotel. Which was brutal. And like, fortunately, we hadn't got a game for a little while, so the team manager managed to go back to the hotel and get me my boots. But um, turning up to the first tournament, so excited as an 18-year-old that you've managed to forget your boots was something else. But played that tournament, and I wasn't like, I'd come off the bench for 2-3 minutes. So fitness wise, I really enjoyed it. Thought it was awesome. Like, loved it. And then the real taste for me was the first tournament that I came in as a starter, which was, so I think that was at the end of the season. And then, sorry, that's a lie. So for the rest of that season, I was kind of running the same role, coming off the bench 2-3 minutes. Doesn't You can get by like that. You don't have to be too fit to do that. The next season, I come in as a 19-year-old, as a starter, and I played in Gold Coast. And I remember the first 14 minutes I played, it was so hot there. It's the only place I've ever burnt in my life as well. So hot there. And I played that 40 minutes, and I remember sitting there with a cold towel over my head in the change rooms thinking, I can't do this. There's no way I can do this. This is too difficult. I was like, I can't believe we have 5 more games to play. It was insane, man. I've never had a feeling like that before. I was like, wow. But then for some reason, I was fine after that. But the first 14 minutes I played was
Yeah.
something I'll never forget.
That's crazy because, I mean, thinking about that, 19 years old on that stage, how did your second season go? So you do your first season, you do your second season. How successful were you guys? How did you go personally? Were you scoring tries? Were you showing the magic, the left foot
No,
snap? No.
I wasn't actually. So this kind of comes into, obviously I listened to Anthony's one, and I've had like I had something called osteitis pubis at that point.
Yes.
Um, and I was so stupid with it, mate. Like, I just kept on trying to play, and I couldn't really do anything. I was playing fly half at that stage, which was probably the only time I was playing fly half in sevens. But I was just kind of managing to kind of get through games, but not really showing too much. Um, I ended up having to have an operation after I played still maybe 5 tournaments. And this isn't me saying I'm a tough dude or anything, because I can assure you, I don't think I'm a tough dude. I'm
Yeah.
just a stupid one sometimes. Like, if I like, there's far far tougher people out there, but I can just be dumb when it comes to certain injuries, like my sort of Achilles tendonitis. Obviously, nothing too like serious, but I end up just playing for way too long instead of having that sort of ability to push myself back. But um, I managed to play 5 tournaments, and then when I got back after that operation, was when I felt like myself again, and that's when I started playing pretty good.
That's when I met you.
Yeah, yeah, that
Came
was
in,
when you came.
I came in during that period, and I
Yeah,
remember meeting you, and we didn't hit it off straight away. It was because you were doing your own stuff. You were sort of rehabbing. I'd see you come and kick Nike boots, come
yeah,
out, kick it. Like, oh, that guy's handsome. Who's he? You know what I mean? But no, just coming into that environment, and we talk about cultures. How would you explain our culture while we were,
um,
especially the first one under Rusty? Big shout out to Rusty, the Samwise Ganji of Ben Ryan's ring and the Frodo that he was, because obviously it was Ben Ryan's program, with Rusty being a very big part of that, with Nadine, Will, and of
yeah,
course Bretty,
yeah,
South African physio, who was like Action Hank, done it all,
yeah.
seen it all, unbelievable man. And tell me, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that culture, because I thought it was a special culture. I mean, it's my
Yeah.
professional culture I ever came into, but it was like a family, eh? It was tight.
Sorry, is Rusty Russell Earnshaw? Is that who
Yeah,
you're
Russell
talking?
Earnshaw,
Is that
yeah. Very important to the Sevens program and very important to us too. He was a eccentric, forward-thinking, open-minded coach, strong-minded, but unbelievable, unbelievable for me especially. But yeah, let's talk
Yeah.
about the culture.
So it's weird actually because I'd say we had pretty much the same team in both under Ben Ryan and under Simon Amor, and I would say it was two very different cultures. And in the first one, it might also have been like my age and sort of where I was in terms of like maybe I don't know, not leadership roles because it's such a tight team. The Sevens being like what 18 people in a squad or something, but anyway, with the Ben Ryan culture, it was like you said, him and Rusty were really forward thinking. Like what Ben Ryan was so good at was finding sort of those 1%ers where it be like I remember a couple of things. We tried blue light glasses, I think it was, to try and help with the jet lag.
Yeah.
We were pretty much some of the first teams to do GPS units. What else? We wouldn't
Eating.
eat any of the plain food. He'd give us like we got a nutritionist to kind of properly help. That also is supposed to help with jet lag and stuff like that. Like I really like Ben's sort of forward thinking, and what he was really good at is I'd been in an environment in terms of I'd been used to a head coach being like especially as a young guy, like a figure that you'd kind of step on eggshells walking around. You wouldn't like, you know that the head coach is there. You'd be a bit worried about being like a young kid, wouldn't know what questions to ask. You'd just feel a bit awkward and yeah, it'd feel a bit awkward sort of around a head coach. Wouldn't know what to say. Whereas and a lot of the time those coaches knew that and they wouldn't speak to you as a young kid. You just had that feeling like it's just the way it used to be. The academy boys were the academy boys. The head coach would only speak to you if there was reason to speak to you. It was that sort of thing. I came in and Ben Ryan was talking to me straight away, like made me feel welcome straight away. And there wasn't like a hierarchy of like he's young, he's old. It was like was just together. And I really liked that. There was like James Rodwell, who was at that stage would have been not old in his career, but he was experienced and it was just like talking to anybody else. There wasn't like a hierarchy where maybe there was at sort of a London Irish where obviously there's a bigger squad and a lot of difference in ages and stuff. But that culture was like really tight knit and everyone was close. There wasn't even a hierarchy as such with Ben. He was open door system, anyone could come in. So I enjoyed that. Simon's was I I might say that Simon and Simon's one of my favorite coaches I've ever had in my life. I thought Simon was incredible. First time I'd played for 3-4 years at that point, maybe 3 years, and I'd had what I thought was my best season at Sevens, coming in and new coach comes in and I'm like, I sit down, have a one-on-one with him, and one of the first things he says to me is he says, like, "How do you think you went last season?" I was like, "Yeah, I thought I was pretty good." And he was like, "I think you can be better." I was like, "Huh?" I thought I was, I thought I'd had a really good season. I wasn't expecting a new coach to come in and sort of say that straight away. He was like, "I don't think you're fulfilling your potential at all." He goes, "I think you could be one of the best centers in the world, but you're not anywhere near that right now. You have all the potential to be, but you're not there." And I just kind of remember being like, "Jesus!" Like, just thought we were just going to sit down and catch up a little bit, see where the head's at. But Simon, and the first tournament we had, he didn't pick me. He brought me as TR, which was only the second time I'd been TR. The first time was when I was my very first tournament. And he said to me, "Look, this isn't a punishment. This is just because, to be fair, I'd just come back from an injury as well." But he said, "Look, you get yourself fit and you start being more consistent, you'll play every tournament for me, but not this first one. And then I played every tournament, I think, for him when I was fit after that. And I'd say he pretty much got the best out of me. He knew what made me tick. And he's also like strangely intelligent. He's got like a great combination of like, you feel like you can talk to him as a coach,
Yeah.
and you also have a little worry that, like, he will, if you he won't agree with something you're saying. If he doesn't agree with it, he'll fully just be like, no, that's wrong, like, but he'll respect your decision at the same time. He'll respect your opinion at the same time. And I just always had a feeling that he backed me, and that was so sort of important to me. The culture he created was very different. It was more like he was such a smart tactician. Ben Ryan was more, you guys have your you guys have uh your special traits, go out and show them. Simon also thought that had the same sort of thing. Like, he wanted boys to express themselves, but he had like tactics, and like I just remember we played a game against Fiji one time, and we had this one tactic of like basically like it wasn't quite as simple as this, but no one jump out the line. We will just basically stand still. They're all going to try and step into you, and it was the strangest game ever. And we managed to beat Fiji by like 3 tries in Hong Kong. And it was just like, he was just such a smart coach. And culture-wise, he had a bit more of a system to it. Leadership, so he brought Tom Mitchell in as captain. And we had more of like I'd say more of a structure in terms of how things worked, helped by the fact that we were full-time at that point. But at the same time, everyone was so tight, and everyone worked really hard in both environments.
Yeah.
That's a common theme with you sevens boys. You guys train. Your training is next level,
Yeah.
and I was really interested to hear, because I don't want to speak for you at the end of the day, but I imagine the Olympics was pretty great moments in your career. But I was really interested to hear what the training was like leading up to that Olympic Games in Rio, because you guys obviously got the silver medal. If I remember correctly, you lost to a very, very strong Fijian side.
Yeah, the scoreline would say the same as well. Yeah.
But I can only imagine that the training must have been brutal leading up to that. Talk us through what the camps were like and the prep.
Yeah, so I got myself to a position in the sevens where I was never the top of fitness. I was always sort of around the middle, and uh, and I'd kind of go through some, towards the end of it. I think I got myself to a pretty decent level in terms of some scores and stuff. I was reasonably high up, but I was never. There were some boys, Ollie Lindsay, Hay, Tom Mitchell, Dan Norton, and some boys were freakishly fit, but I was I was up there. I then, through Simon, Simon also, this is another reason why he was so good for me. I always went into sevens wanting to go back into 15s, and he had said to me early on, I think it could have even been in that first meeting, he was like, I think we want to get you back into 15s. Like, we want you to succeed in the sevens and go into 15s. And we had this sort of hope that I'd make it as far as possible, kind of thing. But he the best time to leave was just before the year before the Olympics. So he said to me, "Look, I think this is a good year. I'll bring you, no promises at all, but you play well for your 15s team. We're going to bring you back into camp for the GB stuff, and you play well in camp like anyone else, then you'll get selected," sort of thing. So I had a year out of sevens, and went to 15s, and I thought I'd stayed pretty fit throughout my whole time at Newcastle. Turn up to this GB camp, and first thing we do was a 1K time trial, just 10 sort of 10 lengths of the pitch. And there was a huge gap between the sevens boys and the boys that came from 15s. And I'd only been out of sevens for 1 year, and I was in that 15s group. and I was like, "This is crazy." I felt like I was really fit, and I'm still far behind. We had a 12-week program to try and get ourselves fit, and it was a tough camp, physically and mentally, because obviously you're like, I've got 12 weeks to try and get myself fit and try and get myself in what is the biggest tournament I'll ever play. I had ever played in at that point, and obviously still is now. But um, and the training was brutal because we went into the way it worked was there was European competitions called FIRA. Jeff will know obviously all about those ones, and we entered those with 2 GB teams. So we kind of ended up playing against each other in these tournaments, um, and that was like your trial. So it was like full on. Like imagine I'm coming against like Mark Bennett, who me and him are both going for the same position. I'm going up against Luke Morgan or whatever, and obviously in training you, it's a battle, but there's something about when you're in a tournament, you're playing against other teams, and it's like you meet each other in the final of this European tournament. So you want to win and you want to get selected for the GB stuff. It was, and you've got 12 weeks to do it. It was intense, and even by the end of that 12 weeks, I did some extras and stuff to try and get myself in as best position as possible. And I don't think I was as fit as I was playing sevens that year before, even after probably the hardest camp I've ever done.
To be fair, bro, you did room with Jeff for however many seasons. You could probably get through any training camp.
Yeah, those are the best times.
Pleasure to room with me, but
Those were the best times, man.
that's where the friendship was born, my friend. In those rooms. I mean, when you're on tour with someone, you must imagine you fly in. You fly in every 2 weeks, and you've got 10 days in a country. And all you're doing is training. Come back to the hotel, feet up. We watch so many documentaries,
Yeah.
weirdest documentaries about all sorts, sport, serial killers. We love that. We became almost CSI fundies, like we knew everything about anything,
It's ridiculous, but it's important when you're going away. For me, anyway, it's just important when you're going away for that long to have like a roomie that you want to spend time with, and you like look forward to going away. Yeah, Jeff's my favorite roomie I've had, obviously, and we had some good times, man. It was funny, that was kind of when I can't remember if we'd got really good mates from rooming or we were already mates before. I can't actually remember how it worked.
Before it was before because we started hanging out, the three of us, you, me, and Ellis, coming to
Yes.
Weybridge, few little shindigs.
Yeah,
All of a sudden, we started rooming at the same time, and we just hung out together all the time. We'd go out together, we'd train together. It was almost because I was living in Kingston, which was
yeah,
down the way, and we all lived quite close to each other. And then we started just hanging out, and eventually, yeah, man, we were rooming together. It was a special time for me. It's like the best tour days of my life in terms of going on. You travel the world. A lot of people will say, "Oh, you traveled the world. How many times did you do it?" I mean, we must have done it for 4 or 5 years. And you travel, you see every single country. You have a few days off to go see the city. It's something special for a 25, 26-year-old to go do. I mean, I look back at it now and think, damn it, what a special time it was. But you do get sick of the travel. I mean,
definitely.
yeah, going into Tokyo, going into Hong Kong, going into these places are your little boy from South Africa. My eyes were wide open, but doing it
Yeah,
with your best mates, something special. I mean, when you're talking about the cultures, I was in both those cultures too, and the senior players that we had in there were special too. I mean, you think of Cracknell, Vickerman, Howley, amazing Rodders, amazing
yeah.
players. Taught me a
No,
lot.
I've been lucky to have some special captains, I reckon, in my time, and
Yeah.
there was a fair few of them in sevens. Like Greg Barden started, uh, and then we were lucky enough to have Rob Vickerman and Tom Mitchell, and
Yeah, Mitch was
some incredible
amazing, man.
captains, man.
Do you know, I never told anyone this, but my last tournament, I was playing at London with you because we took a
Mm,
photo after because we were both
mm,
qualified for the Olympics.
mm.
Took a photo, and on the last tournament, he wrote me a letter. I still got the letter, and goosebumps thinking about it, talking about it now. He just stuck it underneath my pillow.
Mm.
For a captain to do that, and the words he put on that letter, so dear to me, and it was the last tournament, last time I ever played with him, but it was so special. He was such a great leader in his
Yeah.
way. Again, Vickerman, unbelievable. You got to be a great leader if you're leading people through so many ups and downs. You never get tested like you do in sevens. I've played 15s. I've played 15s a long time now. Unbelievable. Up and down, off and on, sleeping in the corner on a mattress, using your t-shirt as a blackout so you don't get caught by the light. I mean, sitting around and there's 20 other teams in the same building as you, and they're playing their music or they're singing, and me and Ellis one time trying to act like Fijians, dancing before trying to do the Fijian. It was anything to get you do anything to get yourself up for a game. It was hilarious. But I remember seeing Ellis do Ellis, you'll know what I'm talking about too, because oh man, just remember when we went to Russia and Ellis was chewed up for taking sleeping pills. And so we're in Russia and we're sitting there, and we've come out to train, and it's a World Cup, and we've got the World Cup in Moscow, and we're playing in Moscow, and Edis is half asleep, and Ben knows he's been taking some sleeping pills to get him through this roughy patch he's having, and he's having a shock of a training session, and Ben just kicks the ball and says, "Stop taking those damn sleeping pills." And then Ellis is like, "What are you on about?" Like he never argued or anything. He was like, goes back to the room, and I'm sitting there and we're watching a movie. And you know how it is, you got two single beds in a hotel room. So two single beds, and in between is your little drawer, like a little table. And I'm watching this Oasis documentary, and all of a sudden I just see a hand go across the table and pick up some pills, and he puts them in his mouth. And I look at him, I say, "Mate, did you just take a sleeping pill? It's in the afternoon now." He looks at me and goes, "No, I don't." Mate, it was one of the funny, but I just cracked up laughing. I was like, "Bro, you can't be taking sleeping pills, brother." He's like, I've got to sleep, man. I'm not sleeping. But little stories like that, I mean, we've got so many of them from our tour.
So many, bro. You got to bear in mind we play like Alex Gray was in our team too, mate. Like he's a combination of top professional and absolute like joker at the same time. Like he was like, it's funny because you say some stories about him and then you're like, geez, this guy sounds nuts. But he was so professional.
Yeah,
But like he was just had some
always in
funny
skins,
stories as well.
always doing his gym, loved the
Yeah.
little arm pump.
Yeah.
And then sometimes, because his belief was so strong, if he believed something, he would do it until, to the T.
Well, let me tell you about this. So he was obviously gutted to, miss out on the Olympics. And he'd said before, though, he'd been like, if I don't make it for this, I'm either going to just go be a championship goalkeeper or just go to the NFL. And I'm like, Shaggy, those two aren't things you can just walk into. Like, those are, they're two pretty different things. I was like, Shaggy, have you ever been in goal before? He's like, no. But, mate, I'm 6'6". My hand-to-eye coordination's unbelievable. Of course I'll be able to do it.
He did do one of those things.
Exactly, but that's
He
the
had
kind
that
of thing I'm
conviction.
thinking about. Yeah.
He had that conviction. If he believed it, try to tell him otherwise.
That's a Falcons. But just going back to the Olympics, what was that experience like?
The way I describe the actual Olympics in general, or the Olympic Village, first time we walked in there was like it was. I'd say this to everyone who asks. It was like human Jurassic Park. It was incredible. Like you've got your 7-foot basketball players walking past, and you've got your gymnast that can like walk through your legs. Like it's insane, man.
I love that.
It was incredible, mate. It was so cool. Like first day we go past and we're walking to our like block. We had like a GB block, and there's Djokovic. Just there was the tennis courts in the actual Olympic Village that some of the tennis players are practicing, and we're walking past this Djokovic just hitting some balls with his trainer. We go into the lunch hall, which was massive, and there's Venus and Serena Williams. It was insane. Like and it was kind of it was yeah, it was just an incredible experience. And obviously people talk about how like distractions that are there and stuff, and to be fair, there's we were maybe lucky about the distraction situation in some respects. I say lucky. I would have quite liked to experience some of the nightlife that was going on at the end, which we didn't. But because we kind of finished our tournament early doors, so we had to move out, so we weren't there for the sort of leaving ceremony. But like the opening ceremony was insane. It was just kind of like one of those sort of moments where you're like, yeah, this is wild. Something you watch the Olympics sort of as a kid, and you're next thing you know, you're there doing something that you've done for since you were since I was like 10. Obviously, with it being 7, something a little bit different, but um, yeah, it was incredible.
And so obviously post World Cup, post Olympic Games, that's when you kind of made the shift back to 15s, no, with Newcastle Falcons.
Yeah, yeah, kind of. I'd done 1 season at Newcastle, and it was in between.
And was that shift back into the 15s? Did you come back a better player? Was it an easy transition? What kind of
Um,
tools did you take from the sevens game and use or implement in your 15-a-side game for you personally?
yeah, well, fortunately for my position, I'd played obviously 15s before. Um, Obviously, I was very young, so I had a lot to learn in terms of positionally, tactically, and things like that. But in terms of the skill set, I couldn't think of anything that could have prepared me better than the sevens. Like Jeff said, from a mental point of view, you're kind of used to playing in front of big crowds. A lot of the time, actually bigger, to be fair, in sevens than in 15s. I don't know how many of the sevens fans were actually watching the sevens, but there was a lot of people in the stadium anyway. Um, and from a physical standpoint, I was obviously much. If I look back at when I played last, when I was 17, and I came into Newcastle at 20. Sorry, 18 was my last 15s game, and then I think I came to Newcastle at 23, so it'd been quite a long time since I'd played 15s, but watched a lot and thought I kind of knew what I was doing. But physically, I was much better. I was fitter, I was stronger, I was faster, and I always say it's like the way I sort of play rugby is I'm 50% athlete, 50% rugby player. Like it's just as important for me to be as good as an athlete as possible, for me to be the best rugby player I can, just in the position that I am and the way I kind of play. But the first game of 15s I played, I remember I'd played 14 minutes of rugby for 5 years. Like that was the most I'd played, or 20 minutes if you get to a finals, the most I'd played. So I'm looking up at the clock in my first Newcastle pre-season game, thinking we must be near half time. 16 minutes, and I'm there thinking, how this is wild. um, and one thing sevens had taught me through maybe a little bit like what I'd said in terms of like you've got to go out and get something yourself. It's not just going to come to you. Like maybe I thought it was going to happen when I was younger. Um, sevens had taught me that. I'd gone into Newcastle. Didn't really know where I was going to sort of fit in because they had Sonotti, who was a really good player, Simon Hammersley, um, and they'd signed an Italian who had a really good Six Nations Italian winger called Jamba Venditti, really nice guy. So I'm sure they'd kind of signed them as starters, if you know what I mean. I would have thought that anyway. So I came in and I wasn't starting straight away, but I kind of came in, and then that was more of a case of like trying to fight for something rather than thinking it was going to happen, and ended up training pretty well and playing quite a few games and playing all right.
And like obviously from Newcastle, you went to Wasps. You had a really successful run at Wasps, and now plying your trade in Italy. Jeff and I are big on this word adaptability. As journeymen, we've had to be adaptable. Clearly, you have that characteristic where you're able to adapt. Whether it be the sevens, 15s, changing teams. How have you found adapting to life in Italy?
Yeah, I think every single club I've gone to, I've been very fortunate that there's been like, I've always found a group or to be fair, in all those teams, there's not even really been needed to be a group. I feel like they've all been like pretty much everyone in the team have been good people. It shows that it's a good team. And fortunately, in that WAS team, at the start, what I would say is at the start there was a lot of big characters in that WAS team. Maybe the team wasn't quite as close. I was injured a fair bit in my first season, so that could have had something to do with it. But like in terms of like being adaptable, you just end up finding people that there's so many people in the team. There's going to be somebody that you're going to get on with, and I'd like to think I get on with quite a few people, and you end up kind of gravitating towards the people you want to spend more time with. But I think it's about sitting down and just speaking to people. Like, you never know who you're going to end up really getting on with. To be honest, a prime example is my best mate over here, Jeff. Like, we in the sevens, it's not like we like got on immediately. It was kind of a case of we hadn't spent much time together. That's all it pretty much was. And then later down the line, we end up sort of spending some time together. And the next thing friends. He's been my best man, and we've been sort of best mates since then. Like, you kind of just sit down and speak to people and decide who you want to spend most time with, and those are the people that will make you better as a person. And obviously, when you're playing rugby, you want them to make you better as a rugby player by pushing you too. And alongside that, doesn't need to be all serious. You want to have the people that you have jokes with and have a bit of banter with as well.
Well, I guess at Treviso, you're a little bit lucky in a sense that there are quite a few Wasp boys knocking about there.
Yeah, they're all flooding through now. It's wild.
It's like most of the back line is there with you.
Yeah, it is. Like, and like it all started off for me, even from a WASP connection. Andrea Massi was here, and he was the one that got me over here, as the coach. So then I came over. Then who was it next? Jacob, Paolo, Matteo, Minozzi, Malachi as well. So there's a good crop of us. And that's also helped. But it's like you're saying, in terms of being adaptable, I've been very fortunate. The Italian boys, pretty much all of them speak English, which has been pretty helpful from the start, because then you can get friendships early doors. So moving to a new country has been an experience in terms of like things outside of rugby, because I'm fortunate enough that within rugby there's a lot of English speakers and things like that. But yeah, if you're looking to, I'd say for people, if they wanted something different or something new in terms of a rugby career, I think you learn so much about yourself, and yeah, you just learn so much about yourself when you go somewhere new and experience a whole different country. It's quite lucky to be able to do that, I guess.
And Treviso is a beautiful part of the world, isn't it? What, you like half an hour from Venice?
Yeah, literally 20-minute train from Venice, and then there's an hour away from sort of some mountains. People go skiing and snowboarding or whatever if you fancy doing that. Yeah, it's a pretty nice part of the world.
And Jeff, you wanted to we spoke about mentors before we hit roll and how important it is to have the right people in your circle and things like that. How much of a role do you think you played in Anthony, your brother's development? Because you're obviously quite a few years older than him. You mentioned how John Fisher took you under your wing earlier in the chat. And would you say you did the same for your brother? Because he's obviously been really successful. We're really proud of what he's achieved. How much of a role have you played in his development?
Take nothing away from Anthony at all. I think regardless of me being there or not, I think he would have achieved exactly what he's done now.
Yeah.
I think he's that type of guy. He's very driven, and maybe a little. I think we're pretty similar in quite a strange actually amount of ways, especially listening to the podcast with you boys. We've had some very similar things when it comes to, especially on like a mental point of being too chilled, then going too much, and then trying to find somewhere in the middle. Been through all of that. In terms of me being a mentor to him, I would like to think that he's so competitive that me just being there and playing
Is enough.
has made him want to just one up me each time. I think that's definitely something. And me and him, all three of us have got a real good relationship. And in terms of mentors, I'd like to think I've helped him along the way. One thing he definitely reminded me of recently was, I remember when he was 18, he was talking about getting a Maori tattoo, like a sleeve. He just texted me randomly, actually, not too long ago, just being like, "Thanks, mate. I just had a memory of you telling me to make sure I don't get a Maori tattoo when I was 18."
Should have
I'd
told
like
him.
to think I've helped.
You should have told him, get it. It would have been so.
Yeah, imagine. I'd like to think I've helped him in little ways along the way, but like I said, in terms of mentors, all three of us are fortunate enough that we have the parents we have, and like, I can't explain to you how you don't appreciate it maybe as much when you're younger, but now that you're older, you're thinking, my mum hates driving, hates the cold, and hates rugby. And she took all three of us boys every weekend to any game that we could go. And if she couldn't take us, she'd find someone who could.
Yeah.
Or something
Can't
like
do
that.
it without the mums,
Nah, man. Like someone told me something the other day. I'd read something that was like, what was it? It's something along the lines of like, the one person that wants to talk to you every single day is your mum. And that is true in my case, because if I don't FaceTime my mum in a couple of days, she's thinking, what's going on? She gets annoyed, like, and it's something that you take for granted sometimes. You're like, oh goodness, but like in my case, it's so true. Like, she'd be the one person, along with obviously not my immediate family in terms of my wife and daughter or whatever, because I live with them, but outside that circle, I think she's probably the only person that would want to talk to me every single day, and I think that's just like important. And then along with my dad, in terms of like the way he was in trying to get the best out of us, and being an example of hard work, it's just, I think, put us in a situation where all three of us are a bit weird in terms of like our I don't even know what it is. Like Anthony's drive sort of to succeed, and Callum's work rate as well when it comes to just general work. Like, I think our parents have put us in a good situation where I'd like to think we're reasonably resilient, even though at the same time I haven't had anything to be crazy resilient about. So those tests will still come, I'm sure.
Shout out to all the amazing parents out there, man.
But Mike, just to give,
yeah,
just jumping in there, to give you a picture of this family, unbelievable. I mean, we're very lucky ourselves to have very strong families and parents that took us to every single game. And I mean, even Fires, Van Furen, helping you with your cricket, always behind you. Same with my old man. But Duncan, the epitome of a father, unbelievable. Always there for the boys. I'll tell you a story. One time we were driving and it was snowing, myself and Ellis. It was snowing outside in London. We're driving the car to Marcus, and we're sliding all over the place. And we park outside Marcus's house, and a lorry driver, drives past and throws like a piece of like snow at us or something.
Yeah.
And we go inside, we're like ducking, and someone's throwing us with snow. And we ring the doorbell. Marcus comes out, and we're like, "Hey, what's happening?" And we say, "Hey, someone's throwing a." Duncan gets up, bursts out the door. "Where are they? Let's go get them!" Like, but it was the first one to get out. But it was unbelievable. I looked at this guy. He's like, "Bro, this guy's ready to roll. He's ready to go for it." This guy,
He's on job.
he had our back. But that was the first time I met him,
Mm.
and he's unbelievable with the boys. How he's a father to them, and then Viv, Marcus's mother, so caring, so soft, doesn't give a shit about rugby, but like the backbone of the family. You know what I mean? It's unbelievable to be around that presence in that family, and it reminds me of my family. I think it's a testament to a lot of successful, and even if you don't have a strong family core, or there's so many stories of great athletes that have come from good parenting, together or single, or whatever it is, and not everyone has that luxury, But when you do it, you got to appreciate it. You got to be very grateful for having that that family support. Because at the end of the day, I've looked at my family and it's given me a lot of inspiration. My why. Why do I want to do this? Why do I want to play? I want to, you want to make them proud. You want to show them that all the hard work is worth it. It's a big driver. It's like that human instinct, that people don't talk about a lot. But
It's so funny you mention your why, because a couple of weeks ago, Alex Codling asked us to write our why and send it to him. And one of the things I put in was about my mom and my dad, and obviously how they supported us or me and supported my goals and dreams. And I remember I wrote, thinking back, I remember my mom would like stand and catch for me while I practiced my throwing until like 1 a.m.
Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
you take it for granted when you're a laddie or
she's
youngster.
yeah.
Yeah, but that's what they do for us. So
Just
yeah.
just on that, VV, in terms of mentorship and coaching style, I think that's so underrated. Like, in terms of like your mum just sitting there till 1 a.m. catching, like, she didn't have to do that. She probably didn't really want to either. It was probably, or, it's just not something she would have thought she'd done. But if we flip it from not even just a parenting side, from a coaching side, the best coaches sometimes aren't the best technically or tactically. They're the ones that will just sit there and they will do anything to make you better. They'll, like, you text them at 7 in the morning and they'll go for a kicking session with you because you're like, you need a kicking session. Or say you just turn around and you're like, I need to work on some footwork. Next day they've got footwork drills for you. That, I think it's such an underrated side of rugby where, and like I talked about, the things that you remember, I've mentioned already about, because like someone like John Fisher, I was never really close with Fisher. Like, we didn't spend much time. I'd never spent much time with him, but like he won't remember that conversation he had with me. Like, we were on a night out, mate, and he was turning around to me, telling me um, like how we thought, what he thought I was like, what I needed to do, and how good a player or whatever he thought I was. Simon Amor, like,
Yeah.
backing me. Same with like John Fletcher. The coaches you remember are ones that do that. Even someone like Dean Richards, right, at Newcastle, he never like, and I'm not talking about blowing smoke up someone's ass. That's not something you need to be doing. It's just the little things like Dean Richards. We'd be uh losing a couple points at half time, and he's come in at half time and started bollocking the whole team. And then he just would catch eyes with me and he'd just give me like a smile. And I just knew exactly what he thought. He was just kind of like, he just knew, he was like, you don't need this bollocking. He was like, you just need to get the ball in your hands. I just knew that's what like he kind of was meant. He was like he just had that kind of trust in me as well without even saying it. It's just like little things about knowing your players or knowing your teammates. And I think it's so underrated in rugby.
Oh,
Being
yeah,
management.
Definitely.
I totally agree. And I think we had this conversation not long ago, didn't we, Jeff, about like coaching styles and things like that. And obviously, all three of us have had a lot of coaches throughout our career.
You more than
But
one.
yeah.
Record
Well,
no, lekker. That's good. Good for us.
it's given.
That's what we're trying to create here. You know what I mean? This podcast is about. Really, it's to help. For me, that's why we started this thing. I think we started this thing so we can, if I'm 19 years old, I want to go somewhere where I can learn something and try to find little tools. How do I get into a sevens program? How does it look? Where do you go? Where do you start? And I think that's what me and Mikey put our heads together and said, how do you help a young Jeff Williams or a young Michael Van Buren? Let's make something that can do that. So the Journeymen, the website, the coaching, the consulting, we're going around asking people, and we're going to formulate these tools that everyone's sharing that we know, of course, because we've been in the professional game for 12 years, but unbelievably excited about it. Unbelievably excited to share so many stories and so much. Like, for me, I think you are the best of my generation, the best 7s to 15s player that we've had. You've gone into the 7s and dominated. You've gone into the 15s and dominated. Everyone knew your name. Again, you're not the loudest human being in terms of Instagram or profiling or stuff like that. You're very, Duncan, you've got that Duncan vibe, or you're very, down to earth with that. But your footwork and some of your highlight reels, you can go back and watch it on YouTube. It's unbelievable. that step, that movement, the speed, the balance, like a cheetah. I mean, of course, yes, unbiasedly, of course, I'm your best friend, but before that, what you've done on the field has been unbelievable. So hearing from you and hearing how you transition in and out, and I think we're going to get you on the show quite a bit, because I think it's so important for young players wanting to go into sevens, then going into 15s. Where's your reference point? Who do you talk to? There's no book on this, buddy. There's no, it's quite thin now, even the coaching and stuff in the sevens game and in the UK now. Sevens was the biggest thing. Now it's just GB. It's very cool. I love it. I like the old school. I like England having obviously England sevens player, you want to have the union being represented. Scotland, Wales, those matches were unbelievable. Playing in Scotland, you've got a match. Anyway, I'm going off topic. The point is this. For us, we want to build this as a reference point for young players coming through and young journeymen. You can be 19, you can be 16, you can be 20. I mean, look at me. I was 21 when I came over to France. So late developers, early developers, and having you on here is gold for us. So thanks, my buddy.
No,
I'm sorry, I interrupted you there. Where were you going with it, buddy?
No, I was just going to say that obviously, like with coaches, I've found exactly what Mark said. Like, you don't necessarily need to be the most technically astute. Is that the word, astute?
Yeah, astute.
But if you can be a coach that gets the players to want to run through a wall for you and go to war for you, you'll be okay. And that generally starts with treating the player like a human being,
Yeah. Sorry, carry on, VB.
No. And like going that extra mile, as Mark was saying.
Same as captains. That like we spoke about Vix and Tom Mitchell, and you'd watch them pre-kickoff, and they had this calmness about them for a start, which obviously kind of helps, but each their own. Some people like the guy that sort of shouts and is loud or whatever, but that's what they were so good at, is they knew their players well enough. They knew what to say to each person. The way Tom Mitchell would speak to me would be different to the way he would speak to James Rodwell or even Dan Norton. It's exactly the same as Rob Vickerman. Rob Vickerman just came every game. He would just say like, all he would say to me, and was just flame on. That was it. And it was like one of those, like, it sounds ridiculous when you think about it. It's like sounds like Ben 10 or some cartoon or whatever. But that's all that I needed, because I knew that all he meant by that, and we'd spoke about it, was he just said it was just to flick the switch. It was all he was trying to say to me. He was like, you know what to do, just flick the switch and off you go. Like, he's like, he doesn't need to say much to me. It was that kind of that vibe. And when someone sort of knows you well enough that that's all they can say to get you up for a game, it's those 1%ers that will make you. I'd like to think that I'm driven enough that I will work hard in a game because I want to, like, because I want to play well for myself. Like, that will always happen. But there's something a little extra that you do get added on if you want to play well for a coach or play well for a team or play well for a captain.
I found Joe Launchbury at Wasps to be right up there with the best captain I've ever played for. He genuinely cared about his players.
Yeah.
He was a great captain. And then I played with Sergio Parise at Stade Francais. And yeah, I was a bit younger and I was kind of like fanboying. But he had an aura around the club. Like, he was Mr. Paris. He was Mr. Stade Francais. So those two guys were without question the two best captains I'd ever played for. And they made a point of making sure their players were okay.
100% with Joe Launchbury. That's exactly why he was so good, because he would always make sure that his players were okay. If there was anything, and one thing I respected so much about him was, you get a lot of people now, and there's nothing wrong with it, but like, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just not maybe my style. Like maybe Jeff already mentioned, I don't want to big myself up. I would want somebody else to big me up. Does that make sense? Like, that's not. And he would go out of his way to speak to the coaches because something's happened to somebody, and he'd help that player. You wouldn't know that he'd done that. He wouldn't, like, he's not one of those guys who'd be like, oh, by the way, I did this. You wouldn't hear about it. You'd end up hearing about it from somebody else because he's heard that something's happened to you, maybe through coaching, you've been promised a game, or like, I don't know, some kind of example. And then he would go to the coach being like, did this happen? This isn't fair, or whatever. And he wouldn't come to you and say, I've done this. You'd hear it from somebody else. And like, he wouldn't do anything to try and make himself look good. He just did it because he wanted to.
Mm. Yeah, no, having a good captain and a good coach and understanding how to lead your players is such a, as you say, overlooked but vital kind of component of any sporting organization or business, really. But just before we close, and it's been a great chat, I want to understand from you, because we spoke a bit to your brother about the tools he uses. You know, do you have specific tools in the lead up to a game, or kind of things you fall back to? Like, what are your kind of, weapons, if you will, that prepare you for kickoff on a weekend?
Rules of time.
We've me and Jeff have
Tools of the Titans.
yeah.
What did I write on Twitter?
Jeff and I have been lucky enough to.
Oh, sorry. Just to digress. So I'm checking Jeff's in Twitter now, because sometimes his spelling's not the best. So we load your Butts video up on Twitter, and Jeff comments on it, and he said, "Yeah, put tools of Titans." So you know how Jeff loves the strong stuff. You know, anything to do with gods of war, Medal of Honor, or tools of Titans.
Shut up, Mikey.
He's all over that. But he goes, "I've put tools of Titans." So I'm like, sweet, that sounds good. So I go look at it, and he spelled Titans Titians. I'm like, brother, that makes no. You gotta change that.
You know what happened? I've got an excuse. The damn phone predicted text, and you know when you spell it wrong, and then they say red, there's a red thing there. Normally you can change it. You click on the other one, it didn't change. It stayed Titans.
Titties. It predicted titties, did it?
The tools of the tits. Well, there you go. Tits. So,
sorry, Marcus. Sorry, I interrupted you there. What were you going to say?
No, that just cracked me up. The tools of the Titians, beautiful. No, what was I going to say? Yeah, no, me and Jeff have been lucky enough to work with Katie Warrener, who's an unbelievable sports psychologist, married to one of the best physios there is around as well. Two great people, but like, before I saw her, psychologically, this is maybe where me and Anthony were actually a little bit different. Anthony used to get so nervous before games, like really, really nervous before games, and seeing a psychologist has changed everything for him. I had times where I'd get really, really nervous before a game, but I didn't really suffer from that too much. But I would just kind of like rock up and be like, I hope I play well today, that sort of thing. And what Katie, I would either be I would tend to be kind of in the middle quite a lot. If it was a really big game, I'd go over the top maybe and be too nervous. And what Katie kind of instilled in me was a bit like the sort of tools you have to cope with either way. I would flip through, which is I'm sure normal, being too relaxed, in the middle, or maybe over the top. And she kind of taught me tools for me specifically on how to deal with all of them. The first one, if you're too chilled out, that kind of goes back to like what happens with you. If I don't play well or don't put the effort in, but if I play well but I don't put the effort in, I could have done something better. I'm the type of guy that I'll watch a game back and I'll look back and think, why didn't I work harder here? So I don't want that feeling after a game. So I'll think that if I'm too chilled before a game, my thought is you don't want to look back at this game and think you haven't worked hard enough. If I'm overhyped for a game, then I remember what Katie said once, which I just never thought of before. She was like, if you're too nervous for a game, then there's nothing you can do about it. And I was like, wait, what? And I was kind of like, she was like, you just have to embrace it. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. So I was like, she had got some tools for me to kind of deal with that. But then I was like, look, she was like, how will you cope with it? How do you think it will work with you? And I remember me thinking, the way it worked with me is I'm looking over at somebody else thinking he's just as nervous as I am for this game. And that used to just chill me out. Or Katie's thing of being like, if nothing's going to work to chill you out, then you're going to have to go out there and play anyway. So what can you do about it? You can't just stop that from happening. If you're nervous, you're nervous. Go back to like putting it as a work rate thing. Just work hard enough, and you've got to play that game anyway. So you just go out there and sort of and play the game that you always have played. Like, it doesn't make any difference. You can't, if you're too nervous for a game, it doesn't. You're still going to have to play it. So you play it.
So would you say you've put a big currency on kind of preparing mentally? Because I know you put the work in. I mean, the Watson boys are notorious for putting the work in. But so has that been your biggest, let's say, work on for your career, your mental?
No, I actually don't know. Yes and no. Sorry. So yeah, that's the mental side of thing. The physical side of thing has always been like, I've gone from having like a checklist that not at Newcastle, sorry. Newcastle, I think, was when I prepared for games the best. I had all the tools in place where I would I'd gone from a point where I reckon I'd done too much to try and prep for a game, where I didn't feel good going into a game, and that's not necessarily just me doing more stuff. It was just the general training or whatever, and then maybe not doing the right amount of recovery. And then I've gone to a position where I did too much, where I would be on the my fitness pal, making sure I have the exact amount of calories that I need. I've got 5 alarms set on my phone because I need to eat at this time, eat this much, and eat that kind of stuff. And I was like, I need to do this before a game. That was too much for me because I'm not that type of guy. Like, it works for some people where they like that structure. I'm not that type of guy. So now what I kind of do is I'd like to think I'm experienced enough that I've got a bit of a feel of things. Like, I know if I've not done enough. I know if I've done too much. And so that might be, and you get to a point sometimes where you're like, oh man, I have to go in this sauna for 20 minutes or something. And you're like, if you're really going to beat yourself up about that, you're probably exhausting all that energy just thinking about getting in there. Do something else to chill yourself out. Find something you like doing to recover. So I'm very much like a go off how I feel. If that's I need to catch, I have things I need to do. Catch high balls, do a certain amount of like Achilles stuff for sure. And just things like that leading into a game. But it's just based on how I feel. If I feel like I've done everything I need to in training, I might not need to do anything after. If I haven't, and I feel like and maybe I'm playing against a team that kick a lot of high balls, I have to catch a couple more. And then as soon as I've caught a couple, and I'm like, yeah, that's all I need. Like, it's a feel thing for me. I'm ready if I know I'm ready.
That makes sense.
Yeah, very in tune with yourself. I think that's a really good thing to know when you need more or need less. I think people, well, a lot of professionals get caught up in the idea of, I mean, even Johnny Wilkinson is probably the best, the extreme of extreme, one of the greatest. And he talks about how he, overtrained or over-prepared or overstressed about that and never felt he wasn't connected with himself, the body and mind connected as one. He talks a lot about it. He's a very interesting guy to listen to.
One thing I've found interesting as well is you end up getting a lot of people that, like, you see people talk about like the ultimate professionals. A lot of the time, those ultimate professionals end up becoming that after a serious injury, because I feel like potentially they've had a little thought to be like, this could get taken away from me. So I now need to do everything I can to get back or get better. And then they kind of being out of it makes you potentially appreciate what you had. And then you kind of really want to hold on to that. And people end up working harder or smarter or whatever you want to call it, and end up coming back better after a serious injury. So in terms of like, what you guys at the Journeymen Co are trying to do in terms of teaching some young boys, what I would say, a big one on that is like, people sometimes get really down about big injuries and obviously you will get down about that kind of thing, but you learn. The times I've learned a lot about myself has been through some injuries in terms of doing too much, too little, trying to find that balance. So when one bad thing happens in terms of an injury, make sure that you learn something from that and you come back better in terms of like that might just be your professionalism or whatever.
Great advice.
Bad injuries are not necessarily a terrible thing at all. You hear about people, Johnny May, my brother's a good example, they come back after an injury and they're more athletic and more professional. It's a good combination.
Yeah. No, well, Marcus, honestly, it's been such a privilege having you on tonight. We better get you off because Em's going to start fighting with us soon.
That's cool.
But no, we look forward to chatting to you again.
Yeah.
And hopefully you can become a regular here because you are very interesting, very insightful, and you've got years of experience under your belt. And God knows I'd rather talk to you than Jeff.
I'm keen,
Joking,
boys.
joking.
Count me in. Count me in.
No, we'll have you on. Joking,
No,
boys,
listen,
yeah.
Marky, you know how I feel. Thank you so much. And like I said before, I think we're going to get you on a little segment for us because we love working with great humans, and I've yet to come across someone better than you. So talking to you tonight's always a privilege, and hearing your stories and reminiscing is so cool. All the best in Italy, my brother. I'll probably FaceTime you after this video anyway, just to say hi. Yeah, thanks for coming on. Thanks for giving us your time. We really appreciate it. You at the Journeymen Co. Myself and Mikey were very excited to get you on, and we got the Watson brothers. And shout out to the Watson family, Carl too. You guys are doing great things, and now we're sharing it with other people. So hopefully it can help them. Hopefully you can see, transitions between 7s and 15s, or cool little things to think about, stress, dealing with rugby. Everyone feels it, even the best in the world. So yeah, thanks, mate. Thanks for sharing that. Hopefully it helps at least one person.
No, I appreciate it a lot, guys. Thanks very much. And anytime I'm back on, anywhere I can help, I'm here to help, and I'll look forward to doing so as well.